continuing on this idea of what is culture, at what level does it reside, let's take a look at the non-human primates. These are our closest living biological relatives. What can we learn from them to gain insight into the human condition? Where do we come from? So do any other animals have culture? Jane Goodall, sort of famous primatologist, first person to go out and study in the wild chimpanzees. So chimpanzee, the scientific name is Pan troglodytes. Pan is the genus, like Homo is the genus for humans. Troglodytes is the species. Sapiens is the species for humans. And I was going to say a few million years ago, we were not the only species in the genus Homo walking around Earth. There was other human-like looking species also in our genus walking around at the same time as us. Kind of interesting to think about. And so that's just how we designate species, through the genus and the species. It's binomial nomenclature. And she spent over 45 years at her study site in Gombe, Tanzania in Africa, where chimps live. Just to give you an idea of where they're distributed, they're an old world ape, meaning there's none in the Americas. The pink areas are known probable areas that chimp populations are established. So we know that they're there. The green is possible areas. So the habitat's appropriate. It's not necessarily established that there's chimp populations in those areas. A primer, sort of an introduction to chimps. They're also omnivorous. They can eat a wide variety of food, including meat, plants, nuts, and sort of everything in between. And this is adaptive for them. It allows them to exploit different resources. They're mobile. They move around a lot to go forage, and also they're territorial. They're dexterous, grasping and precision grip, opposable thumbs. This is a key primate trait, initially evolved to allow primates to move around in the trees, but now very useful that we've come down onto the ground and are bipedal. Large brain size relative to other animals. So chimps, for example, something like 300 to 400 cranial capacity. It's a measure of the volume. Humans, for example, anywhere between sort of 13 and 1500 cc. So they have a large brain to body size ratio. And just so you know, if you're on the 13 versus the 15 side of cranial capacity, that doesn't matter. It's not related to intelligence. You're just maybe smaller as a person or bigger. And they live in groups. They're social. They won't develop properly in isolation. Chimps, infants, juveniles have to be with their mothers for years before they can survive on their own, before they've learned what they need to socially, or to eat, to get along with others, to mate, all this other stuff that they have to learn before they're ready. Not so different than human primates, right? If a baby will not develop if it's born and it just sits there, no one takes care of it, interacts with it, teaches it, it doesn't survive, right? That enculturation is key for us. Also true, this period of social learning, really important for chimps as well. And so humans last shared a common ancestor with chimps about 7 million years ago. You'll often hear people say, in an effort to refute evolution, which, by the way, just a theory isn't a thing. A theory is like, the theory of gravity. It's pretty much how things work. And so when people try sometimes to refute the theory of evolution, they'll say, well, there's no missing link, right? There's no missing link that connects sort of chimpanzees to humans. Does anyone know why this is a total misnomer? Why this is a red herring? Why this is not relevant or a valid point to try to challenge sort of evolution?
It's the same reason as, like, if you look at like a family tree, you'd say, like, well, there's a missing link between you and your cousin. It's like, no, we had a common ancestor. I'm not descended from my cousin. We both have shared grandparents.
I like your analogy there. That's such a great, I might steal that. Thanks, Kai. Yeah, exactly. Let me try and draw for a sec without screwing up the slide. We'll see. So just a schematic, if you will. We don't evolve from, sorry that it keeps creating these underlines. Those are, the horizontal lines are not my own. We don't descend from chimps, and scientists don't argue that at all. What they argue is that humans and chimps once shared a common ancestor, right? About 7 million years ago. Let me just try doing it with my hand. About 7 million years ago on our sort of evolutionary tree that looks terrible. Sorry about that. So moving along, you have sort of prosimians, your first primates, monkeys, then apes. And at some point about 7 million years ago, there was a split. We shared a common ancestor and genetic divergence began, one line ultimately leading to chimpanzees, pan troglodytes, and the other ultimately leading to Homo sapiens. And there's lots of other lines and bushes and branching that's going on in this little simple tree I drew. So it's not sort of linear like that. We don't descend from chimps. We used to share a common ancestor with them. So it's a misnomer to say there's no missing link that's been found. There's no such thing. And what links us has already been found in the fossil record. The evidence is only getting stronger. From a genetic point of view, humans and chimps are about 98% identical, and this makes them our closest living biological relative. There's this really great TED Talk by Jane Goodall, and what she talks about is what really separates humans from chimpanzees. Not a lot is kind of what she says. People used to sort of 50s, 60s define humans as man the tool maker. Humans were defined as distinct from other species because they could make tools. Well, Jane Goodall was the first to observe chimpanzees not just using tools, but making tools, modifying objects. And so when that happened, her observation was groundbreaking. And Louis Leakey, this other famous anthropologist that you don't need to know about, he said at the time, we have to either redefine tool, we must either redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as humans, because literally that was the definition of what it was to be human. Then humans were defined by the ability for culture. That's not true anymore either. Other animals also have culture. And what Jane Goodall kind of goes on to say is, she hasn't found the missing link because there's no such thing, but she's come closer than anyone else. And what they mean here by missing link is what really separates us from chimpanzees, the non-human primates. Jane Goodall says the only difference between humans and chimps is our sophisticated language. Humans do have the unique capability for spoken language in ways that other species don't, at least not that we're aware of. And this is powerful. We'll talk about that next week. And she kind of goes on in the talk to say, use our language to start changing the world, right? Stop deforesting the habitats of other species, sort of destroying the planet that our survival depends on. These chimps are sentient, they're emotional, they're so intelligent. It's really horrifying, honestly, that the way that they're sort of encaged, incarcerated, if you will. Medical research is done on them. Chimps held in captivity are known to self-mutilate, right? Because they have emotions and feelings and brains and thoughts. They're not meant to be locked in cages. And so I did, way back in my earlier years, some research for the first sort of researcher that taught sign language to chimpanzees. His name was Alan Gardner. Him and his late wife did this pioneering study. That's what's highlighted on the slide. Don't worry about it. And Washoe was the name of the chimp, after Washoe County in Reno, Nevada. And so Washoe, they taught how to sign hundreds of different signs, and she could communicate back and forth with her human caretaker. And so just one example of how smart these folks, these chimps are. I worked on coding data. So I wasn't there when the chimps were there. That's before my time, the 60s. I was there just working on the data. And the chimp I worked on, there was 5 chimps altogether, was Tatu. That was her name. And so just an example from the data, they put the chimps to bed at night. And the human caretaker, let's just call her Susan, was putting Tatu to bed. And they're using sign language. And she says, so Susan signs to Tatu. I don't know sign language, so I'm making this up. peekaboo. And so Tatu, she's in her bed and she grabs her blanket, right? And she hides under the blanket. And then she peeks out. Tatu peeks out at Susan. And Susan signs, where'd Tatu go? And Tatu smiles and sort of hoots, which is like a chimp laugh. And then she goes back under the blanket, right? So cool, because Tatu understood not just the literal meanings of the signs, right? Peekaboo and, oh, where'd Tatu go? Even though she's clearly right there. She understood the literal meaning. She knew it was a joke. And then she played back, right? With Susan. Really, really intelligent, sentient animals. There's a fantastic film on YouTube, you can look it up, called Ape Genius. If you're interested in any of this stuff, about 45 minutes, super interesting, really good stuff. If you're interested, Ape Genius. Culture among the non-human primates. What does it look like? And again, what can we learn from them to try to understand human behavior?